When I was between the age of 5.5 and 6, my mother came to my grandmother's house because my grandmother needed to, strangely enough, go to Puerto Rico to help someone with their child who was being molested. And when she left me with my mother, and my mother was an addict. I guess leaving her with some money was temptation. And for some reason, for whatever reason, my father, who I didn't really see often, he just came to see me randomly, and my mom let us hang out for a little while. My earliest memory of him, unfortunately, is that day. I remember sitting in the living room and she said, "Hey, do you want to just take her?" And I remember thinking, what does she mean by that? And he said, "Yeah, sure." And she gave him a bag with my stuff. And then I went to his house, and still not, you're 5, you don't understand what's happening. Then I was there with someone who somewhat felt like a complete stranger. Then I spent the night at his house, or I thought I was spending the night. I didn't know that it was a permanent situation. So then after a few days, I remember just feeling very abandoned and confused. And I wasn't sure, like, did she just not want me? Was there something wrong with me? Did my grandma already have this planned and I just didn't know about it? Like, so many questions. And when you're 5, you don't understand what's going on. So after that, 1 week led to 2 weeks, 2 weeks led to 3 months, and it just ended up becoming my normal. I do know that my grandmother, when she came back from Puerto Rico, tried to get me back from my father. And he pretty much told her, "I'm her biological father. You can try to take me to court, but you're not going to win." And his family was pretty well off enough to fight for me if they wanted to. So my grandmother kind of just had to accept it. And after about 2 to 3 months, which I wasn't aware was a grooming process, but in hindsight, as an adult, once you start to understand what grooming is, you start to think, was he being nice to me because I was his only child? Or was he being nice to me because he was leading into something? I used to sleep in his room with him. And I just remember one day he was wearing like basketball shorts and he was laying on the bed on his back. And he asked me to like scratch behind his knee, and then he asked me to like scratch his thigh. And he wasn't wearing underwear, which I didn't know. I ended up finding out as I was going further, and he kept on saying, "Go further, go further." And then I felt something and I immediately felt uncomfortable, but I didn't necessarily know that it was wrong. I just remember freezing and like holding my hand, and then he said, "No, grab it." And then I did what he said. Then he just had me jack him off. And I just did that until he finished, and he finished in his shorts. And I just remember thinking, like, what just happened? Why do I feel so uncomfortable? But for him, he was like, "Okay, you can go to bed now." And we had been watching a movie together. I don't remember what the movie was. Kind of block that out. I guess that was the beginning. So from there, I remember he started testing his limits. So then he would put his hands in my underwear when I was sleeping. And then there was a time that he would start taking a bath with me all the time. And it's really frustrating to know that there were so many people in that house, which was my aunt, my uncle, my grandmother, and my grandfather, and then my father. And nobody questioned why a 25, 26-year-old man was interested in taking a shower with a child with the door locked. He would always have me sit on his face in the bathtub, and he would perform orals on me. And then I don't remember performing oral on him that much when we would take a bath together. He would be the one doing it to me. That was the first time that I experienced an orgasm. And I think what's really confusing is when you're about 6 years old, it's this amazing feeling, but because of how you get that feeling, you can't. I remember my brain going like a million miles per hour and feeling guilty that I liked it. I felt so gross after the first time. And I just remember he gave me the towel, and then it became a regular thing. And then after he got comfortable doing that, then I do remember there was a few times that he tried to penetrate, lay me on the bed. And the few times that he did, I screamed. It was very painful. And it got to a point that he would try every night, almost every night before bed. And I think he thought, if I keep on, she's going to loosen up, or it's going to get easier. She's going to be okay. I don't understand or know why he continued to try. But I will say each time I went from being loud to not as loud, because he would give me this stern look as if I was going to get him in trouble. And that was another sign for me that I felt like, then this isn't okay. because I still was at that point where I didn't know if it was okay or not, but he would tell me, don't say anything. You can't tell anybody. This is how daddies love their daughters. That's what he would say. And it never felt right. After that, I think he started to feel uncomfortable looking at me when he would try to do it on top of me, because my face was always looking at his face. Unless I was in pain, I would remember that I would cringe and squeeze my face and my hands together. And I think it made it uncomfortable for him. So then he started trying to do anal. And that was even more painful. But again, he tried it at least. I was with him for about 1.5 years. And it could be that in my mind, I think that it was way more than what it was, or it really was as much as my brain thinks it is. But I don't remember a week or more than 3 days going by where he wasn't trying. After about 3 months, when he did the first incident of me going in his shorts, he started going to my mom's, my mom and my grandma's house, the area, and my aunt was there. He would go and visit my aunt and my mom. So there was a time we'd get there. He would never let me spend the night at my grandma's house, which it was kind of like in a cul-de-sac where they all lived. So she was literally like across the street from my aunt's house, and he would never let me stay at her house, which sucked because I still had my own bedroom there because I had lived there when I was younger for so many years. So I would have to sleep in the room with him at my aunt's house, and he would still do things to me there, which I used to always think, dude, you're like really bold. You're just doing this at my family's house. And then I would think to myself, like, they're going to catch you. You're so going to get caught, and this is going to be over, and I'm never going to have to see you again. But I didn't know this till I got older. An aunt, when I was there, didn't like the attention that my dad would give me. So when I would come up to her for love and affection or attention, she would kind of push me away. I didn't know that. I guess I had blocked that out. She told me years later. She came and she apologized, and she was crying, and I didn't understand, like, what are you sorry for? Why are you crying? And this was literally like maybe about 17, 18 years ago. And she told me, and you know, when someone tells you something, it triggers a memory, but it's a memory that you didn't even know was there. When she said it, all these memories started rushing back, and I remember walking to her on the couch and her just shoving me away, and then I started remembering that she'd use her leg and kind of push me away a little bit. And so after that, I remember loving when we would come back home to his home, and for a little while, things would kind of get like a father-daughter relationship. So I learned how to make French toast with him, and he would sit me on the counter. And I used to think, okay, well, I guess this is my life now. This is what my life is going to be, and I have to accept it. We would have like a good day, and then I would think like, okay, I can go in the room and I can go to sleep. And that wasn't the case. Most times when we had a good day, that meant that when it was bedtime, no matter how early I went to bed, no matter if he was out all night because he was also an addict, I would remember that I would lay with my whole body facing the wall, and I remember praying. I can't tell you how many times, please not tonight. I just don't want, it was a good day. Can't we leave it that way? There were nights that he wouldn't be home, and he wouldn't be home till really late. So I would sneak in my grandma and my grandpa's room, and I would lay right in between them. And they were so big and I was so little that there was one time I remember that he came in to get me, and my grandmother said in Spanish, "What are you doing? Just leave her alone. Let her sleep. She's already sleeping." And I wasn't sleeping, but I was the relief that I felt the first day that happened. So I remember, like, I'm going to their bed every night that he's not home. And I would. The majority of the time that he would stay out late, I would stay in my grandmother's room. And I don't believe that they knew anything was happening. One day we went to my mom's house, and I was taking a bath with my mom, and she was washing my hair, and she was sitting behind me facing my back, and I was facing the wall. And she said, "Mama, is everything okay?" And I just remember saying, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she's like, "No, you're different. You're not as happy as you used to be, and I don't see you smiling all the time." I said, "It's okay." And then I remember thinking, "I'm sorry, I'll smile more." She said, no, that's not why I'm saying that. Don't smile if you don't want to smile, if you're not happy." And this was one of those moments where my mom wasn't on anything, and that she was being, that amazing mom that she was when she wasn't under the influence. And then I think she felt something, and I unintentionally tensed up my body when she put her hands by my waist. And she's like, "No, what's wrong?" She said, "I won't get mad. I will listen. Tell me what's wrong." And then I just remember crying, and I was about 6.5. And I remember crying so uncontrollably, I could barely breathe. And it scared her, because it went from I'm okay, I'll smile more, to my entire body just collapsed. And she's like, oh my God, oh my God. And she like turned me around and she looked at me, and I couldn't look at her eyes. I just remember I stuck my face down and I put it in her shoulders, and we're both just naked in the bathtub, and I'm just crying and I couldn't talk. She starts drying me. She jumps out of the shower, dries herself, grabs me, turns off the water, and starts drying me. And she's still asking me in Spanish, like, Mama, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. Oh my God, what's wrong? What's wrong? She grabs my face and she puts me eye contact. And then she said, is somebody touching you? I didn't say anything. And she's like, Mama, is somebody touching you? And then she saw my body language where I cried even more, like my whole body just did something. And I remember because right when my body did that, she's like, oh my God. And her eyes opened really wide and she just hugged me. And for what felt could have been like 20 or 30 minutes, which is probably just all of 5 minutes, she just held me and we were both crying. And she was just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Who's doing this? What's happening? Who's touching you? And then I still didn't say anything. And from her hugging me, she grabbed my head and did the eye contact again. And she said, is it your father? And then I just looked at her and I nodded my head. I still couldn't say anything. And I think it was because I was crying so much. I felt like if one word came out, I don't know. I think when I look back, I think I like was going to throw up. Like I just couldn't. So I told her that's all I needed to say. Then we went into the living room because we were taking a bath in my grandma's house, and she told my grandma, and then my grandma started crying. And then I remember her saying, did he try to put his thing in your thing? And then I just remember saying yes. And then it was sobbing at this point. And then my grandmother was consoling her while she was trying to console me. And then my grandmother was angry and she said, this is all your fault. You let her go with him. You should have never let her go with him. And then my mom just told my grandma, I remember her getting angry and she was like, this isn't the time. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear that. Take her because he's coming back. Because he had left me there when he went to the store or somewhere. I know he left. Mind you, where we lived, the police station was like maybe a block to 2 blocks away. So at this time, which unfortunately, I think it's like Hispanics do this. Whenever you're molested by someone in the family, it's like, let's just keep you away from that person, but you really don't involve the law. So she didn't immediately think, let me call the cops. And I remember that day, she said, take her and then just be gone for 2 or 3 hours. And when he comes, I'm going to tell him he has to leave and he can't have her. I remember we went to Golden Spoon and I got a vanilla yogurt and I got sprinkles on it. So till this day, whenever I see a Golden Spoon, I will have like a kid size and I would just sit there and it just brings back memories of that's when I was saved. So it's like a really good memory. Like I was saved, and this is the taste that's connected with finally being saved, or so I thought. So after that, I felt like a few weeks had passed by, but it could have been a few days. My grandmother and my grandpa on my father's side came to my grandma's house, and I remember being in her house because I'm now living with her again in my own room. And they came and they said, what she's saying is not true. She's lying. She's a little spoiled. And I remember thinking how hurtful it was to think that the adults that I absolutely adored would say that about me because I said something about their golden child. So my grandmother said, I remember hearing my grandmother, she's amazing. She is definitely someone you don't want to cross, but she has the biggest heart and she's the sweetest person in the world. So when they told her that, I remember her looking at my grandmother, and my grandfather was he wasn't the one that said I was a spoiled brat. He just sat there like behind my grandma and let my grandma do the talking. She said, don't you dare call my granddaughter a liar. A little girl isn't going to lie about something like that. You're sick. There's something wrong with you. Get out of my house. And then my grandma kept on talking, my dad's mom. And I remember hearing my grandmother yell, I said, get out of my house. My grandma doesn't cuss. My grandma, she's never done drugs. She's never had alcohol. Like she's just very this proper person. And then I remember my grandmother, my dad's mom, just kind of jumped and looked at her because my grandmother was a very soft-spoken person. They left the house. And then again, at that moment, I thought, phew, okay, they're not going to take me. I'm good. One day we're eating at my aunt's house all of my cousins were eating at a table, and the door is right here. And then to the right, when you walk into the door, there's a long table. And I remember there was 3 cousins on one side and then 2 or 3 on the other side, and I was in the middle. So it was like the boys are on one side and the girls are on another. And my father just walked in, looked to the right, saw that I was there, and grabbed me. And the way he grabbed me was my head was in the front side of him and my legs were in the back, and he was holding me like the long way. And you hear my aunt and my other aunt screaming, and he wasn't a big guy, but he wasn't a little guy either. He was more like husky, almost built like a football player, but he was only 5'6". He was really short. And my aunt's screaming, my other aunt's screaming, my cousins are screaming. And they're screaming my name, and my grandmother hears the screaming from her house, and she comes running out and sees him running out towards his car. And right before he can get to his car, my grandmother pulled me out of his hands, put me on the floor, and laid across from me, almost like if you're making a cross on the floor, and she was on top. And I knew my dad had a gun. He showed it to me before he ever started doing things to me. And I don't know if he did that on purpose to scare me, but I do remember seeing the gun, and he would say, like, this is for our safety. I remember where it was. He showed me how to load it if I ever needed it. So when I was on the floor and my grandmother was laying on top of me, he said, give me my daughter. I don't want to hurt you. Give me my daughter. And she said, no, you're not going to take her. And he had what we thought was a gun in his pocket. And he had this like long jacket, and he put it towards her head, and he put it so hard that later on when the police had looked at it, you could see like a round where it would look like it was a barrel on her forehead of the gun. He was holding it to her really hard, and he said, I'll kill you. Give me my daughter. I don't care if I have to kill you, something to that extent. And she said, you will get her over my dead body. And I just remember thinking, till this day, that's a story that I've said over and over again, because people always say what they'll do in a certain situation, but you never know what you'll do until you're in that situation. And I saw her. She had a gun to her head, or what she thought was a gun to her head, and she did not care. That kind of love is just, when I say I love that lady, like I love that lady. So my cousin rushed from my aunt's house to my grandmother's house and called 911 when nobody knew that that's what she did, because it was just so much chaos. So you immediately hear the siren. And then my dad got really scared, and he looked up, and he was holding the gun in his pocket, pointing up. And then he looks around and he runs to my aunt's house because the door was still unlocked. She was peeking through when they didn't know if he had a gun or not. So then he rushes through the house, and then you hear them screaming. My cousins are screaming. Then they run out of the house. My grandmother gets up, grabs me. My dad is in my aunt's backyard, and the cops come and they go find my father. And everybody was saying like, he had a gun, be careful, he's armed. They couldn't find a gun. What they did end up finding was a tube. Till this day, we don't know if he threw it further or if it was just a tube that had been there before and they thought that that's what he had. Till this day, we don't know. They didn't find a gun, but they only looked where her backyard was. It was connected to 3 other backyards in the back. So we don't know how far they looked. So after that, that's when I thought my life was going to get better. And the cops were told what happened. My father, I'll never forget, standing next to my grandmother, and she was holding me, and he gave me this look. I remember that look that he gave me. It was just this angry look. So he had told the officers not to let me stay with my mother because she was a drug addict. And my mother wasn't there at the time. So he said, I don't want my daughter staying with her grandmother. She has no custody of her. They're lying. I didn't do anything. And then that's when my grandmother said, this is why he can't have her back. So because my mom was an addict, and I don't know if it was just because it was in the 80s, they didn't let me stay with my grandmother. They took me to the police station. And then from there, once they got a little bit of information from me, they had like a person from like social services talking to me. And then they took me to the hospital. And that was when they did, I guess it's like a rape kit. I remember having to turn around and be on all fours. I remember them having to do swabs and check my area. And when you're that little and you hear there's one person, which I think was a nurse, is writing down the note, and then the doctor is describing everything. So I remember hearing there's some tear, there's some bruising, there's some scabbing, and I'm just on all fours with my cheeks spread apart, and I'm 7 years old. And then they had to take pictures, which was really uncomfortable. After that, they asked me a few questions, and then I got to get dressed, and they said, okay, well, your grandma's waiting for you. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going home. She gave me a hug and she was crying. And I'm thinking she's crying because of the whole ordeal. And then she looked at me, she said, I'm going to do everything I can to get you back. And I just thought to myself, where am I going? The social services lady took me to Orangewood, and I had to go into foster care. And that day, I just remember thinking, this is my life. Am I going to be here forever? Again, still regretting why I said anything. I just remember thinking I should have just kept my mouth shut. My grandmother says that I was there for 2 weeks. I remember feeling it was more like 2 months. They wouldn't allow my grandma to just get custody of me. So they made my mom take parenting classes, and she had to drug test for a certain amount of weeks in order for them to finally release me to her. And then after a certain amount of time, my grandmother came, and it was amazing because it was like, you can go home. And my mom was with her, and she just looked at me. She said, I'm sorry. On like Tuesdays, I would see a counselor. On Wednesdays, I would see a social worker. And then on Thursdays, I would see a specialist. So after all of that came the day that I had to testify against him. So after that, he was sentenced to 7 years and given credit for 2 years during the first few months of the trial. So I heard my grandmother saying that this is why she thought my grandfather died, my father's father. After they did the rape kit on me, when you go to trial, there's the transcripts and the pictures, and they're all put in this stack. It almost looks like a book, and they give it to everybody. When my grandfather saw the details, he collapsed and had a heart attack, and he died shortly after. 10, 15 years ago, I blamed myself for my grandfather dying. If I wouldn't have said anything, it wouldn't have happened, and he would still be here, and I'd have a relationship with him. And that's what I used to tell myself. Also, not long after, in 2020, on my birthday, I got the results for a DNA test that I took for Ancestry, and I got in contact with my cousin, and I sent her a message. And I hadn't had any contact with my father's side of the family since all of that happened, since I was 9 years old. So I found them, and I reconnected with them, and then I found out, because I had been looking online, so I asked them about my father, and it wouldn't show if he was incarcerated, but it didn't show an address to where he was at, so I couldn't figure it out. And they said, oh no, he's still in jail. He was in the hospital. He was in a coma for 6 months. One of my aunts was like, no, I feel like he's gonna pull through. And he did. And it was maybe a month before I connected with them, so I thought, this is my chance. I want to go see him, and I want to confront him. 2020 didn't let that happen because of COVID. Then the following year, I asked my aunt, and she had spoken to him, and I guess he was kind of open to it. But then he got a staph infection, he went into a coma, and then he died. I just remember being so angry. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to be able to just ask why. I think sometimes when the person that's supposed to protect you the most and love you the most is the person who betrays you the most, you have this false hope. I wanted him to say sorry. It sucks that I looked for a father in every male that was around me. It sucks that sexually I will always have things that I won't do, and things that I won't allow myself to experience because it's a trigger. But I have like the days where I wonder, like, man, what would I be like if that didn't happen to me? And I need to not think of what ifs, because it's the worst thing you could do to yourself. I know that I am who I am today because of it, but I'm still healing from it. I know I haven't fully healed. Every time I think I have, I'm triggered by something, and I'm that little girl again. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. And that's what becomes a little overwhelming. But I will say that I don't mind sharing my story, and I don't mind talking about it, because I've had so many people. Just today, I had posted on my Instagram that I was going to have this opportunity, and a person that follows me told me, I don't want to talk about it, but this happened to me, and this happened to me, and this happened to me. That's why I do this. That's why I talk about it. That's why I try not to talk about it, because I want, if you don't tell anyone in your life, just tell me then. And sometimes that'll help somebody feel better. I will be the person that listens to you if you don't want me to say anything, or you don't want an opinion, or you don't want a back and forth. I don't need to do that. But to be listened to by someone else who's gone through it is very different than talking to someone who hasn't gone through it. It's almost like you have your own language and you feel exactly the way that other person feels. And when they say, well, I did this and this happened to me and this is how I reacted to it, you actually genuinely know how that feels. And it's a weird community that you become a part of without wanting to be a part of it, but you're a part of it. And I used to hate it, but I don't anymore. I like knowing that people can come to me and talk to me about anything.